Hey, it's me, the Tech Time Traveler, I think. You know, I've developed a bit of a fascination with early laptops. They're just such odd-looking things owing to the technological limitations of the time, as well as the various crosswinds in software development. These were the first shoots of true portability. By that, I mean you didn't have to lug around 31 pounds of metal like this Pro 10. You could fit these things in a bag. You could even run them cordlessly on a battery for a few hours. With the arrival of LCD screens for computer use, machines like the Grid Compass gave us the clamshell design we still use today. Machines like the Gavilan SC gave us the word laptop, and even the first touchpad. Machines like the Dualmont Magnum freed us from the tyranny of the power cord by allowing battery use. So what if they looked, you know, kind of weird, with those severely vertically limited LCD screens? And yeah, the Magnum kind of reminds me of
Phone home? Phone home.
Most of these early efforts didn't fare so well in the marketplace though, sometimes due to cost, sometimes due to the manufacturer's inexperience, or just running up against a market that still wasn't even sure they needed a quote-unquote laptop in the first place. But some did manage to make an impression on the marketplace. Today we're going to have a look at one of them, the MicroOffice Roadrunner. What a unique and slightly odd machine. At first blush it looks more or less like a 90s MS-DOS laptop, at least with the lid closed. But open up said lid and you've got something rather different staring at you. Yep, we've got one of those wacky, vertically challenged LCD displays that makes up barely 10% of the lid space. But the screen isn't the only oddity. What the hell is this? Cartridges? Yep, just like the Dualmont Magnum, the Roadrunner runs its software and stores data on these little cartridges. Unlike the Magnum though, there's absolutely no option to plug in a floppy drive. If you power on, right away you notice another difference between this little beast and most of its first-gen clamshell cousins. This doesn't look like MS-DOS. And indeed, that's because it isn't. This machine runs the CP/M operating system instead, or rather a dialect of it. I'll explain as we go. According to this article by the Sydney Herald, the Roadrunner was conceived as a portable companion to your CP/M desktop computer. In this case, they specifically mentioned CP/M machines like the Pro 2. This machine was not intended for any heavy-duty use, just basic road warrior stuff like sending messages back and forth to headquarters, uploading or downloading files, that sort of thing. The Roadrunner was conceived at a technological crossroads. Microsoft's DOS was quickly turning into a Goliath, but the OS it was displacing, Digital Research's CP/M, was still in use by many businesses. MicroOffice decided to go with the establishment camp and modeled the Roadrunner around CP/M compatibility. At least in theory, since the Roadrunner didn't have a disk interface, porting your favorite CP/M software wouldn't be an option. In contemporary reviews, the Roadrunner actually scored pretty well with its critics, thanks to the compact dimensions, lightweight, and not to mention a fairly reasonable price of just $1,700. A review in Creative Computing magazine by David Ull praised most of its design features, except the keyboard design, which David felt hewed a little bit too closely to IBM's practice of just shoving random keys everywhere, including the command key at bottom left, which David said was all too easy to hit by accident. Battery life was a reputed 8 hours on the removable battery pack, which ain't half bad, although really with no disk or hard drives, it's not like this thing had a really heavy demand for power. Yeah, I couldn't help but pounce on this when it came up on eBay. I'd never heard of MicroOffice before and the price was cheap, so why not? Plus, it came with 2 data cartridges and the only 3 pieces of software known to have been available for it: Microsoft Basic, something called Editor, and the spreadsheet software known as SuperCalc. It also came with a removable modem and RS-232 serial card, which we'll dig into in a little bit here. Unfortunately, FedEx got their sausage fingers on it and, well, you know the deal. I honestly don't know how they did this. The machine was really well packed and padded, yet somehow FedEx still managed to apply enough force to slice off several of the keys, like broken right off their key stems, as well as this big chip off the corner. I guess I'm going to have to put it down to brittle plastic, but yeah, thankfully most of the pieces remained in the box, so at least I have some hope of repairing it. Overall, it's a pleasing little machine to look at, although it does feel kind of cheaply made, especially the keyboard, which is buttressed by springs and really thin plastic keycaps. Thickness, well, yeah, obviously next to this HP Envy it's pretty beastly, but compared to other portable options in 1983, I mean... So around the back here we have our speaker and a reset button. We also have this mystery expansion port, which as far as I know was never actually utilized with anything. I think the intent may have been to have some kind of dock or maybe external floppy drive that plugged in or something like that. But I've yet to find any evidence anything was ever sold that actually used it. I'll pop out the modem here. It's a 300 baud unit and it locks in via this edge connector. Nice. MicroOffice serialized the components, and based on the number here, it does seem like this shipped with this particular laptop. Next we have the battery compartment. This is just a sealed plastic housing. MicroOffice used an unusual looking proprietary 4-pin connector which runs off this 7.2 volt DC power adapter and then passes through to the laptop. Let's have a look at the cartridges. Now the software cartridges, those are basically just EEPROMs on PCBs. But for storing user data like a disk on a cartridge-based system, you had to resort to what's called non-volatile RAM. You didn't want the volatile stuff, trust me.
Oh, so you want me to remember that too? Okay, no problem. I'll just remember with everything else that I have to remember. Yeah, I'll just shove that right in here. You know, I only have like 256 bytes, but whatever. I'm sorry, I'm just gonna go to the store and grab some kale. Do you want anything? Okay, I'll see you later. Oh my God, did you park your car behind mine again?
Actually, NVRAM was just a fancy term at that time for regular old static RAM with a battery installed to help it retain information. That's basically it. This is more or less the same thing that Mindset used for their NVRAM carts as well. I think the TRS-80 and maybe the Apple also had a RAM drive of sorts that were constructed this way. Yeah, the batteries in here are obviously long dead. They typically last 3 to 5 years. The operator's manual is a Lilliputian 3-ring binder with print so small even ants would struggle to read it. Not that there's a ton of info here. In fact, this binder contains 2 different versions of the manual for some reason. Oh, and this little love note from MicroOffice that they thought they should toss in to explain how to get the thing running. Apparently that didn't make the cut for the main manual, but they had a change of heart. And here's the fantastic 90-day warranty. I'm still amazed when I see this. Like today we would absolutely freak if a computer didn't come with a 1-year warranty minimum. But yeah, this thing had 3 months, and that was actually pretty common back then. 90 days for a laptop costing the equivalent of $5,500 today? Yeah, nice if you can do it. There's also this sealed manual for SuperCalc. SuperCalc was of course not unique to the Roadrunner, but they were one of the few companies that adapted their software to it. In fact, they might have been one of the only ones. And by the way, something I do plan to test on this outing is whether I can transfer and run other software that isn't on MicroOffice cartridges. Anyway, let's get down to business here. We have a few projects before we can start this thing up. First among them is putting it back together as best we can. So here's the keys and the broken corner piece. Yeah, I don't know how this happened. Like, the laptop was really well padded, like I said, and the lid was closed. So how did 6 or 7 keys manage to snap right off their stems like this? That would have required an impressive amount of force. Thankfully, the stems themselves remained installed in the key switch shafts, so we were able to fish those out and store them for safekeeping and repair. I'm trying to decide how best to approach this. I think I'm going to try removing the top of the machine first, as it looks like it's literally just plastic clips holding everything together here, and I don't want to inadvertently glue the 2 halves together. I have to do this very carefully as the plastic is old and it's already compromised. And there we go. Nice. Just a few cables to disconnect here. Check out this weird little cartridge inside. Why is there a cartridge inside the computer? Is this drive F? I'm thinking not, as it's just composed of 2 EEPROMs. Yeah, the internal cartridge could be this little plug-in board here with what look like RAM chips on it. Nah, that's gotta be just the system RAM expansion to, I think it was 64K. The mainboard looks pretty basic actually. On the left here we have a 2.5 MHz National Semiconductor NSC 800 CPU. We're going to see that again on another similar machine soon, but for now basically just know that it's kind of a Z80 sort of compatible CPU with a similar instruction set. We've also got 2 8K by 8-bit RAM chips here, giving us the system's base of 16 kilobytes. In between and beside are the system's firmware EEPROMs. I love the handwritten labels, which appear to be on common file folder tags. That's how they rolled at MicroOffice. This is similar to what we saw on my mindsets, indicating possibly very low production, since it really wouldn't be ideal to be doing this by the hundreds of thousands. I'm guessing this machine never got to a stage of production, at least in terms of volume, where they were able to just produce these as actual ROMs. I believe this chip here is a peripheral controller of some kind. For the convenience of the end user, MicroOffice shipped their machines with printer support built in, something that was not commonly done with CP/M machines, and in the manual this is cited as a reason why other CP/M software had to be adapted before being able to be used with this machine. There's also this RIOT or RAM I/O timer chip. I admit the reality of these chips is not as exciting as the RIOT acronym would lead you to believe. I'm thinking this lonely RAM chip here might be quote-unquote drive F. I'll have to see how big drive F is when I format it. That'll give me a clue. And of course we have 7 expansion slots total. Not bad. Okay, so putting the corner back together, my plan is simple: Gorilla Glue and manual dexterity. Well, at least I have the former. It takes a second to figure out how this all goes together. It's kind of like putting together a puzzle, but yeah, that's kind of perfect. And now for some glue. Yeah, this stuff ponds really fast. Well, yeah, it's not perfect, but good enough. I'll also apply some glue in the various cracks here, just in the hopes of stopping those situations from getting worse. Now for the keycaps, and boy are these cheaply made. What I'm calling the key stem is just 2 little pieces of plastic with a notch at the end to lock it into the key switch. I can kind of see how these would be easily broken. My wife and I actually went through these one day and pulled each stem out of each key switch that it was stuck in after breaking, and then we basically matched them to each key that they belonged to and tied them together with electrical tape just so that they'd stay together until we could do the repair. Because they're so tiny and thin, putting them back in is going to be a challenge. Further compounding matters is they didn't break cleanly. I think there are little chunks of plastic missing that were between the cap and stem. I considered various ways of reassembling things here, including implanting the key stems in plasticine and then lowering a keycap with a little bit of glue on top of them. But looking at it now, I realize how difficult it would be to align things properly since I can't see what's going on. So yeah, I think the only way to do this is to just try and glue them down carefully by hand, counting on the speed of the glue to fix them in place before they fall over. Yeah, so this glue does dry quickly, as my fingers will attest, but I need a fair bit of it here to hold on to these stems. And yes, I'm going to be resorting to some metal snips to position the stems, since I seem to have lost my tweezers. Well, that looks better than I hoped, but will it be strong enough to survive being plugged back into the switch? I don't know. After allowing 12 hours for the glue to dry, let's see if installing a key will work here. And yeah, each of these should have a spring under it to force the key back up. Cherry MX switches, these are not. Nice, seems to be okay. I thought I'd pull up a key to confirm that they all have springs, and this happened. Yeah, these are seriously brittle. No more pulling keys, I think. Alright, so most of the key repairs turned out okay, or rather okay enough to be reinstalled. Sadly, I seem to have lost a few keycaps and springs along the way. To solve the spring issue, I simply cut down some larger springs, but the keycaps unfortunately are irreplaceable. I'm sure they're somewhere around my shop in a drawer somewhere. Just gotta find them. I know for sure I had all the keys originally because this machine was photographed before being shipped and it shows them all there. Since I'm in here anyway, I might as well use this opportunity to back up all the system firmware ROMs. I don't think I'll be seeing another one of these machines anywhere online, and I don't think they're posted anywhere, so yeah, before I start powering things up, maybe I'll just take a backup. And I can see a fair amount of plain text in there, including the menuing system and errors, so yeah, those look pretty good. Having archived these definitely makes me feel a little safer about messing around with things like power supply. So yeah, speaking of that, the next issue is the battery. The battery is actually 4 NiCad C cells encased in plastic, which like everything else on this laptop is simply glued together, and after 40 years are definitely dead. The voltage of the batteries, as we can see here, is slightly lower at 6 volts DC rather than the 7.2 volts the adapter puts out. There are only 4 pins on the adapter, but only 2 are used, and they align in a way that I could theoretically just plug the adapter directly into the laptop. I'm not really sure how things work in here. The pins that connect the charger to the laptop run straight through the battery case and then have some capacitors installed internally. I'm thinking these ensure the charger doesn't send too much voltage into the laptop. So plugging in directly may not be such a good idea. And anyway, it looks like the adapter isn't putting out 7.2 volts anymore. It's only cranking out about 4, so maybe a voltage regulator or such are shot. What I'm going to do instead is hook up this universal power supply, which can be set to 6 volts exactly. And yeah, it's putting out 6 volts exactly on the nose. Nice. Okay, so I'll remove the batteries themselves, they're garbage anyway, and then I'll solder in some wires so I can connect the adapter easily. Not going to do anything too permanent, just enough for our video. And done. We'll just plug this contraption back in here. Will it work? I don't know. Oh, and by the way, you might have noticed on our tour I didn't point out where the power button was. That's because there is no power button. Basically on this thing you just press a key and it wakes up. There is a red reset button in case around back, but otherwise the machine sleeps after an activity or lid closure and wakes when you reopen. And yeah, it looks like it's powering up. I can see it going into its main boot menu. You might also if you look at it from a certain angle. I do apologize for the odd angle I'm forced to film the screen at here. These early computer LCDs were awful. I mean seriously, I couldn't just fix the camera directly at the screen. You wouldn't see anything and neither would I. To get anything at all to show up on camera and in real life, I have to set the screen at just such an angle and look at it from just such a corner. Anyway, you can see here we're at the main menu. The date is wrong and I doubt this thing is remotely Y2K compliant. With no cartridges installed, we have 4 options: the address book, the utility menu, the scheduler, and terminal. Address books and schedulers were one of those things a lot of manufacturers of these sorts of things thought were must-haves, but I think most people back then didn't really rely on them. They had kind of the old-fashioned Rolodexes or personal phone books. David All's review complained that these needlessly took up memory. He's not wrong. Now, unfortunately, while the NVRAM cartridges have batteries to back them up, the internal F drive, which is used for storing the address book and other critical system information, is backed up by the main batteries. So every time I power this thing up, if I want to use certain apps, I have to format the F drive first so they can store their settings there. It's kind of annoying, but it's not like I'm going on the road with this thing, so that's alright. We access the format option via the utility menu. There is no access to a command prompt, sadly. The format process is really quick. Now let's look at the address book. Yeah, pretty basic stuff here. I really can't see myself using this, even back then. Especially not if all my data were hostage to my remembering to keep the thing charged. Next. Scheduler is nicely formatted, but again, it's pretty basic. I really can't see anyone in the 1980s relying on this either. It was just so much easier to open up a little appointment book. The utility menu is pretty straightforward. We have just a few basic file handling functions. For example, we can do a directory of what's on any cartridge, including the software ROM cartridges. We can delete files on the NVRAM cartridges, rename files, copy files, format a disk, print files, or display. There's also a setup menu which allows us to set communications parameters for serial devices. Okay, the next thing we'll do here is format an NVRAM cartridge. That'll let me demonstrate how loading and saving stuff looked back then. It's in slot B. Each slot corresponds to a drive letter, or as MicroOffice refers to it, a unit. So it'll be unit B to the machine. And we'll run a format. Yeah, no problem. It's so weird thinking I'm formatting RAM. So the first bits of software we'll try will be Editor and Microsoft Basic. You can put in as many program cartridges as you want up to the limit of 4 slots, but because I want to use the NVRAM cartridges for saving and loading, I'll just put these 2 in to begin. Basic does kind of what Basic does. I'm pretty sure the MicroOffice version of Basic is pretty much the same as any other Microsoft Basic, minus any additions for graphics or stuff like that, since this computer can't do that. I'll just input my favorite counting program here. And we'll run it. Bada bing, bada boom, it works. Cool. Now let's save this masterwork to the B drive. I'm sorry, B unit. I'm not exactly sure how you direct files to specific drives, and there's nothing about BASIC in the main operator manual. There was probably a separate one for that. Dang it. So I did a bit of research online, and while I wasn't able to find anything specific about the Roadrunner's version of BASIC, I was able to find some general Microsoft BASIC instruction with saving to disk, and it looks like all you have to do is put the drive letter and a colon inside the quotations before your program file name. So let's see if that works here. Yes! Now let's clear and try reloading. I assume the format of the file name is the same if you're loading, so let's see here. Fantastic, yeah, so that works. Okay, well, that's BASIC. Let's try out editor here. Yeah, maybe calling this a word processor is kind of a mistake. This is more like the editor you would have had for DOS. So we'll go ahead and create a document here. And then store it. I'll try using the search function here just for kicks, just to see if I can find anything in my document, but yeah, I can't even seem to find basic words I know are in there. It has a replace function, so that suggests that it should be able to search within the document. Yeah, I mean, that would be really useful if it could actually find things. Okay, well, yeah, I mean, you get the idea. It's an editor. Okay, so now for SuperCalc. SuperCalc was a CP/M spreadsheet application published a few years before the Roadrunner came out and was basically just adapted for it. It's pretty big and requires 2 cartridges, and for some reason today it just doesn't want to start up. I wonder if they have to be installed in a particular order. Yup, I reversed the cartridges in slot C and D and now it works great. Wow, this is absolutely primitive compared to modern versions of Excel. Ouch. Yeah, creating functions to do things like add columns. I'm way too used to modernity with Excel. The formulas are very different here. Anyway, it's a spreadsheet program, nothing to get too worked up about. Moving along. So the final thing I'd like to attempt here is with the built-in terminal program. I first want to see if I can make this thing talk to my PC. The next goal from there is to see if I can download files from one device to the other. The reason I want to do this is because I want to see if I can hack my way to adding more software to the machine. On the Roadrunner, executable program files are stored with the extension PGM. The PGM extension tells the machine that this is software that can be added to the menu bar. The manual seems to suggest that there's little difference between a cpm.com executable file and a PGM file. And since the manual claims that the machine can run most CPM software, what I'm hoping to do is download a CPM program from a connected computer, then copy it to the Roadrunner, change the extension to PGM, and run it. I'm sure it's not that simple, but what the heck. Of course, another way I can handle this is to burn the software to EEPROMs and then swap the EEPROMs in one of the cartridges. But I'm not 100% sure how to go about storing a program file on EEPROM that way. I did try linking the Roadrunner to my ThinkPad 380 and using Hyperterminal to send stuff to it. I had to use my trusty breakout box to figure out which pins to connect together to get both talking to one another. I found I needed to link the CTS and RTS as well as DTR, DSR, and DCD. But unfortunately, while I could communicate with the 2 machines by simply typing on either, I got hung up trying to send a file from one to the other. Hyperterm wants to select a protocol like X modem or Z modem, etc., but the Roadrunner doesn't have any of those options. In the manual, basically you can send either a text file or what's called an image file, and the manual doesn't really explain what an image file is. I'm assuming image is basically a binary file since the Roadrunner obviously can't display actual pictures, but yeah, that didn't work no matter what I tried. Not like I can store much with just 96 kilobytes at my disposal anyway, the largest cartridge being 64K. The adventure game Zork is over 90K, and the data file it uses is around 80K, so it's just not going to fit on here no matter what I try. Yeah, running a lot of CPM software on this thing would be really tough with these constraints. However, I can run Zork in a kind of roundabout way here. Say hello to my little friend. This is the Moro MD3 desktop computer. It kind of looks like an XT class PC, but not quite. It's actually a Z80 single board computer and it requires a terminal to operate. So if I hook it up and use the Roadrunner as a dumb terminal for it, voila! It's almost like the Roadrunner becomes a real computer. RDP for the 1980s, folks. And yes, then running Zork is no problemo since we're not running it on the actual Roadrunner computer. So what do I think of the Roadrunner? Honestly, I'm not even sure we're reviewing a fully finished product here. As I look around this machine again, I see many signs that this was a well done but not quite complete work. From the hand-labeled EEPROMs to the thin and very basic manuals filled with promises of compatibility that, from our experience, appear to be unfulfilled. The generally low production quality, especially the cheap glued together cartridges, doesn't really give you a finished kind of feel. Relying solely on cartridges and an 8-line LCD with no external monitor option really limited the functionality of the Roadrunner, and while technically it does meet the specifications required to be considered a computer, from a practical standpoint, I feel like it's more of a glorified portable terminal. Perhaps some companies at this juncture were still running Microsoft Basic software of their own or someone else's design, but I think probably most users simply dialed into a company server to report sales, check primitive emails, and stuff like that. I also don't get the feeling that many, if any, software manufacturers bothered adapting their works to run on the Roadrunner's cartridges. After a very, very deep dive on Google, I've yet to find any other software titles than the ones you see here. It seems like Roadrunner hit the scene for a few years and then vanished quickly as the MS-DOS universe took over. In the end though, I agree with David All, this was an attractive laptop option at a time when portable computing was still huge and very heavy. The ability to stash this thing in a standard briefcase and not be weighed down by 30 pounds of gear hanging off your arm was a big deal. And I'm really glad to have one in my collection as they're obviously quite rare today. In terms of what I plan to do with mine, apart from finding the missing keys and completing the keyboard, I'm going to keep messing around and see if I can find a way to port more software to it. If any of you out there in YouTube land have an idea on how to do that, by all means shoot me a message. Anyway, that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it, please give that like button a tickle. If not, hammer that dislike button.
I beg your pardon, Poindexter.
If you really enjoy Tech Time Traveler videos, please consider a subscription. And if you really like what I do, please consider joining my Patreon crew, who help make these videos possible, or even just pick up a t-shirt at my store. We have lots of old computer-themed stuff there. Regardless, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you soon.